Hello everyone, and welcome to the mWater Visualization Power Hour. If you have data relating to water that you want to map and visualize effectively, then you've come to the right place. If you have data on sanitation, hygiene, health, etc., we'll also have some amazing tips for you today. So I'm Petri, I'm the product manager for mWater and Solstice. And good to see you all here today. This session will be an hour long and we will record it. So you'll be able to follow it afterwards as well. The agenda I've got in mind for today is just to begin with some inspirational examples to show you what are the kinds of things that people already do with mWater visualizations. Then I want to spend just a bit of time covering some basic concepts of visualizations within mWater and Solstice. Then I want to give you a quick win, which is to look at automatic survey visualizations and survey reports. So if there's one thing you take away today, this could be it. It's an automatic way to really quickly get from the data that you collect to powerful visualizations. The bulk of today's time will be a deep dive into dashboards, how to actually build them. So you should learn a bit about how to actually get custom widgets, custom charts, custom tables built. And if everything goes to plan, there'll be some time at the end for questions and answers. There's the chat box, but chances are I'll only get to the questions towards the end, but please feel free to comment and to put questions in there. And if needed, we can take the conversation onwards after this session. Now, you notice that I mentioned Solstice. For those of you who are primarily focused on mWater, I'll just mention that Solstice is mWater's sector-agnostic sister brand. Meaning that it's for all those users who don't primarily work in water, sanitation and hygiene, Solstice has all the same features, the same system, and you can begin your data collection in one of the other systems and then carry it on in the other one. So for all of those who wanted to look at their analyzation and visuals even more broadly, keep Solstice in mind. But without further ado, let's jump into some examples of visualizations in mWater. I'll start with something extremely basic as a use case. So let's say that I have collected data in a survey in mWater. Well, we also provide you with the tools right here on the mWater portal website to visualize whatever you collect. This is just a basic example of survey responses, location type, water point functionality, and then some data details. So you can start really small and focused on just the data that you collect in one survey. And you can see it's an interactive dashboard. You can zoom in on any dimension of the data you've collected. So you can start small, you can explore. Next level up might be a water point inventory, as I've got here, for the entire country of Malawi. So here, all this data is driven by what is in the system. So this tells us there's over 120,000 water points being tracked in mWater, and we can handle them all in a visualization. Just briefly, as I mentioned, this is all happening online. You do need an internet connection, and go to portal.mwater.co. From there, however, you can export these visuals that we have and visualizations that you build over to PDF, print them on paper, and so on. You can also share them with other users or other stakeholders, even if they don't have an mWater login. If you don't happen to have an mWater login, sign up for free right now. Just go to portal.mwater.co. Here we've got these hundreds of thousands. We can water points. We can filter them down using what we call quick filters here. And similarly to what I showed, it's all interactive. It's very good for interrogating your data, making discoveries. Maybe I only want to look at the non-functional water points in Blantyre City. Excellent. With a couple of clicks, I can get there and I can see. So hopefully this is starting to give you a sense of what is possible with visualizations. Let me jump onwards. Maps. Another big part of mWater's visualization platform is dynamic, interactive, data-driven maps. Here in the Maps tab. This is a map of piped water access in Haiti by proportion. It's a tile map layer as well as a water point layer. In my example, you can see it's covering the whole country, and it gets more granular, more detailed the more you zoom in. This is just giving you a sense of what's possible. I can deactivate layers. Maybe I'm only interested in the water points. Here's one I know. I can click into it. I can zoom into the individual water point itself. So you know it's driven by that live data in the system. So the key takeaway, maps, full page maps with multiple layers, advanced customization. That's just giving you the idea at the start. Here's another example of visualizations in mWater, a whole water system in Haiti. So right now, you can take the mWater app, Android, iOS, web app, and you can start visualizing and collecting the data for a water system. That includes water points, that includes components of the system, such as generators, pumps, storage tanks, all this, as well as individual pipes. And this example system here shows you all of that together, and the visualization we see has been generated by the system. Doesn't require involvement from us. We don't need to give you necessarily any training. You can do this right now. So one additional way of water visualization in mWater is water systems. A few more examples to get you fired up. Going bigger still, we can have a country overview. Here is Haiti again. So there is this console, so multiple tabs, multiple dashboards and maps together, giving the person with access to this console great overview information that they can keep zooming in down to the commune and CTE level. Includes maps, includes charts, includes pivot tables, and really what you want to show and what you can show depends on what data you have. So the system allows you to do all of this as long as you've got the data in there. Look at the maps and so on, but the main point I want to get across is people are already using mWater at this great national level planning visualization stuff, so chances are you can make use of it as well for visualization, whether it's at the individual survey level, bigger project or organizational level, or perhaps even national level if we look at a map like this, overlaying all kinds of important information in one place to be able to plan better, make better decisions, analyze things better. One last example here, a far region in Ethiopia is making strong use of mWater. This happens to be a time series of satellite sensor data. There's a whole bunch of data available, similarly driven by data in the system. And you can probably start to see a theme here, the way our bar charts, donut charts look. Great. So this was just a whirlwind tour of examples to get you fired up. But don't worry, if your hunger is high now, we'll actually jump into how things work. I just want to talk for a brief moment on the basic concepts of visualization in mWater. I would say that our big vision is that you can visualize and share any data that you have in mWater. So if you've gotten the data in or you have access to it, then don't worry, there will be a way for you to display it and certainly to export it. Now, remember that any data that you collect in mWater belongs to you, not to us. At mWater, it belongs to you and your organization. You can always export it, you can always visualize it. So just a couple of key terms here. We have dashboards. So what do I mean when I say dashboard? I mean a single page with any number of interactive widgets, as we've seen. bar charts, line charts, pivot tables, regular tables, little maps, and so on. And that's what we'll be focusing on mostly today. We saw a map. When I talk about maps, I mean full page maps with many layers, primarily, although you will see map widgets. But with these many layers, you can give the user the power to say, oh, today I don't want to look at the water points, I just want to look at the tiles, or the chloroplasm, or I want to look at the communities, but not the water points, something like that. What I haven't really shown you yet is data grids, and it won't be a focus today, but basically with those I mean spreadsheet-like views of your data, like Excel, rows and columns to view and export data. So for example, if you've made a big survey and collected a lot of data, perhaps you only want to see the top 20 questions from it, the most important 20 questions from the last 30 days. So you could create a data grid that shows you exactly this, and you'll get it in a nice table format. You can order it, and you can even export it to Excel, share it around, whatever you want to do. Dashboards, maps, and data grids. Consoles are then for us the places where you can bring all of those things together side by side. So if a dashboard is a single page, a map is a single page, data grid is a single page, what consoles add to the mix is a place where you can bring all of that side by side in different tabs. And then you can share that console with your stakeholders. So they don't need to remember to go to 5 different dashboards. You just say, okay, this is the Haiti management console. This is the South Sudan management console. This is the Nairobi management console, for example. And you can have all different angles into your data, different surveys, and so on in one place. So, just to be really clear about all these names, dashboards, maps, data grids, and consoles. One last slide about concepts. Widgets are what we call the individual pieces of dashboards. So when you have a bar chart, line chart, donut chart, little map in a dashboard, pivot table, we call them widgets. And the basic idea really is meant to be very simple. You just have to think about a couple of things to get your visualization going. You need to know where your data is coming from, as step one. What is your data source? Is it a survey that you've created? Or is it a site? What is a site? A site is an infrastructure location in the world, in our language. It's a water point, or a community, or a school, or a health facility, and so on. And you can link surveys to them, and they also have some attributes of data of their own. Or it could be something else, sensor data, custom imported data, but you do need to know where's the data coming from that you want to visualize. So when you're creating a widget, as we will see, step 1, pick a data source. Step 2, select the specific data field you want to display. So you've got your source, the source has many fields, you want to pick the right field. For example, if you're starting with water point sites, you might want to show the water point site type by JMP definition. Borehole, hand dug well, whatever it is. Or you might want to show the installation date, or even the SDG service level, and so on and so on. But you want to kind of have that in mind, and you want to be able to pick that out in the right place. If you've got those 2 steps, then you'll start to get something, more often than not, into your visualization. And then you can start elaborating by customizing your visualization. And now that's very context dependent. What do you want to achieve? mWater provides you with a fairly robust set of expressions and formulas that you can use to do calculations live. So that means multiplying numbers, dividing them, or running some kind of formula on them, as we will see. Maybe you want to see the average depth of your boreholes across 1,000 responses. Maybe you want to find the highest value of some water quality property, arsenic for example, or the lowest amount of something. or you want to total everything together. So there are these formulas that you can apply to your number or your data. And you can, of course, start adjusting how your data is displayed. You can choose the color, you can maybe make it more granular. If it's a map, you can choose the icons, you can choose the size of the icons. So kind of get more and more nuanced and closer to the vision of how you might want to visualize stuff. So those 3 steps we'll be practicing now as we go on. So let me move on from all these slides and let's jump into actually creating some visualizations. And perhaps you can follow along if you have a couple of screens, but I'll try and take it step by step. So I want to visualize for you some WaterPoint basic survey data to begin with. So I've gone ahead and created a very simple WaterPoint survey. This is just visible to me in the Surveys tab. But this could be any of your own surveys. Let me just cover this survey briefly so that the rest of the exercise will make more sense. In my main section of the survey, I just have a WaterPoint site question. This allows me to link this survey response to a WaterPoint site. This is very powerful because if I've designed it like this, my enumerator can go in the field and keep coming back to the same WaterPoint site, right? The same borehole, the same well, and keep linking new survey responses there. And that's amazing when I want to see development over time. So we're not trying to let these different responses float in the air. They're actually linked together and the system understands it by this site link question. If you want to learn more about sites, go look at our resource center and the articles about how sites work in mWater. The next field I have is the date of the survey. You can manually enter it in my survey. There's a project phase. Baseline, midline, endline monitoring. Let's say that that's relevant here. And I've also created this drop-down for location type between rural and urban, because I'm interested in analyzing my results between these 2 dimensions. And then the last question in the first section is just an estimate of people using this WaterPoint, so I can get a numerical field in. And the second section, all it contains is a basic WaterPoint functionality question. So whether the WaterPoint at the time it was visited was functional or partially functional but in need of repair, not functional, or no longer existing, or totally abandoned. Now, you could keep adding more and more questions to your survey, of course. We don't have a limit in how complex you make your surveys in mWater. This is just an example. I've deployed this survey, and I've collected some responses for it. But I promised you a quick win. You can see in the responses view that there's a bunch of responses, and I can look at them individually, but mWater actually automatically gives you basic visualizations on a survey by survey basis. So what I'm going to do is in my survey, where I've got data, I'm going to jump into the visualization tab. And voila, the system has automatically given me some visualization. So here we see a map, calendar, donut chart. I didn't prepare this. This is what the system generated for me and will generate for you if you go to this tab. So what's happening here? The system is looking at the data and the data type that you've collected, and it's making a guess, an informed guess about how you might want to see that visualized. So for project phase, it knows that there are only 4 options: baseline, midline, endline, and monitoring. So it's created a donut chart to show the proportions. So we see that most of the visits are monitoring visits. Okay, that kind of makes sense. Great. Location type. Well, I just showed you that location type is between rural and urban. We see most of the points are rural. Great, that makes sense, and it's a pretty nice visual to show the proportion right there. People using this WaterPoint. Okay, what is this doing? It's showing that 6 responses out of all of the responses I've received have put their value, the numerical value, somewhere between 36 and 54, for example. 2 have put it above 107. So these are a bit arbitrarily seeming, these bounds, but here we go. We see a bit of a distribution. Functional status, yet again, we see a donut chart. It does work for this case. So, pretty great. Out of the box, I've got a bunch of visuals that already allow me to understand my results much better than looking at a complicated full table might. But there's more. I want to show you a few more things that this automatic visualization tab is really good for. First of all, I can start filtering down on my data. I can do that in Excel if I export, but I can also do that directly here. So let's add a filter, and let's say I'm only interested in rural data for the moment. I start filtering my data, and we'll see a screen that will become familiar to us. This is the Data Explorer screen, the data source screen. It shows the schema of data. So all the data that's available to me from this survey. I'll just spend a bit of time on this. What I'm interested in is location type. So this is the name of the question in the survey. And I know that this name of the question, location type, collects rural and urban. So when you are designing your own visualizations, you need to understand that the names that you see in this Explorer of data will correspond to your survey questions. I think that can trip people up. Why is it called location type? Well, because your question was named location type, project phase, and so on. Your survey will have different names for their questions, and that's why, and different sections, and that's why this will look different. I'm going to pick location type, but I'll just briefly mention response metadata, because it's important to know that whenever a person, an enumerator, submits a response, the mWater system automatically collects a few pieces of information. So you'll know the survey deployment name, you'll know who submitted the data, so who was the enumerator. If you've got a approval chain, you will see the status of the response. Is it pending? Has it been rejected? Is it final data? Response code is sort of a unique way to say, I'm talking about this response. I'm talking about response with this code, and then it's not any other response. And a few other bits. I often use submitted on. That tells me when did the data reach our server. When was this data sent? And so on. And these come bundled together in every response. So that's what metadata is. Everything else here links to the structure of the survey. I want to select location type. What did I say 2 minutes ago? I want to filter down to rural data only. So now I complete the filter by saying rural. So I'm now telling the system I'm interested in visualizing my data where location type has been answered rural. Now you can see that the map is updated, calendar is updated, monitoring, all of this data now excludes urban data. We are only looking at rural data. So we can explore our data, and any field we can basically filter on. But there's an even more powerful thing I still want to show you on this automatic visualization tab. Useful for many cases where I want to compare one dimension to another. And for that, I want to use split view. Split view here on the top right. That will bring left and right sides to my automatic visualization. Okay, why is that great? It's great because I now have two sets of filters. So I can choose to filter the left side in one way and the right side in another way. And suddenly all kinds of powerful comparisons become available to me. So let's say I want to see rural versus urban data for my survey. All I need to do is pick the first left side filter, do the same deal, main section, location type, and select rural for the left side. Then add to the lower filter, the right side filter, same thing, main section, location type, urban. So I've clicked split view and I have set different filters on different sides. And now we're getting somewhere really interesting. I can see and compare rural and urban side by side in just a tiny amount of work. So we see that the project phases look quite drastically different. Okay, location type becomes not a very useful visual because we filtered on it. So of course it's 100% for each. But I do see the amount quite nicely, 10 to 3. Okay, we see the people using have a very different pattern, very different mix. And functionality is also, on the rural side, less certain than on the urban side, across all time. Okay, so by splitting the view, I can pick any dimension and I can start comparing data. It could be location, it could be functionality, it could be enumerator, anything you can imagine that's part of the data basically. So that's the quick win, and this works for any survey. But this isn't the end point, because there's a lot of reasons where an automatically generated visual isn't all you want, or it's too many. Imagine you've got a survey with 200 questions all visualized like this. Well, that's too much perhaps. You want to distill it, you want to focus it on what's really useful. So then you can do that. How do we do that? Well, the inbuilt way here is, if you've probably also seen it already, is to just click this button for a widget. Add to survey report. A survey report is basically a dashboard, a one-page report with interactive widgets that is attached to the survey only. So only the people who can see the survey can see the survey report. But it is a quick thing to build when you're working on the survey. So I'm going to show it. I tend to build dashboards from scratch. The reason is they're a bit more flexible still, and they're easier to share with other stakeholders without worrying about whether they can see the survey or not. But let's say there are a few fields I want to add. Project phase, I click add to survey report, and if I'm a survey manager, I'm able to do it. Let's say I also want this bar chart. Here we go. Finally, functionality. Excellent. So now I've added them. How do I see them? I go back to the top. Here from my survey tabs, from my WaterPoint survey, I jump over to the survey report. Wow, okay. So now we see the 3 ones we've selected. They're gigantic. Let's do something about that. But they're there. So this edit button on the top right will allow me to start moving them, and you'll become familiar with it the more you work with dashboards. So I switch over from just viewing my report to editing it. A few things happen, a few more buttons come available here at the top, and a big palette of options comes available on the left. So these are all the new things I can add. But before we get to that, let's tidy this up. So, I don't want these to be so big. I want to make my donut chart smaller. How do I do that? When I move my mouse on top of the widget, it gets borders, and at the bottom I can see this little icon with arrows up and down. I will click and drag it that will allow me to resize my widget. It's better. Grab it, drag it, drop it. Nice. This is much better. And what I want is to move this bar chart next to my donut chart. Again, I can hover my mouse on top of the widget. I don't want to delete it. I don't want to edit it. I just want to move it. So I grab it from the top left corner and then I start moving it. You can see this blue line telling me where it will land when I let go. I will let go and it lands on the right side. Now I'll just readjust the sizes a tiny bit. I will do the same here, make this one a bit smaller still. So I can move these widgets around and I can resize them to get what I want. Maybe this could be by here as well. 3 is about the most I think we can have side by side. Okay, so I've now brought some key things together, but perhaps I want to add something that wasn't in my original visualization. Let's say I want to see how the responses are coming in by month. Well, now let's cover the widget here, the widget palette. The way this works is a similar drag and drop logic. These are all tools I can bring in. Let's say I want to give my report a title. I can drag the title in. I can say my survey report. So here we are. Oh, I can undo. Keep those side by side. Oh, giving me a little bit of grief. When in doubt, if there's an orange box, click refresh. That should get things unstuck. So what I want to do is drag a few more of these and show you how these work. So it's reloading the page. I'll just talk through a few of these options. So text allows me to put dynamic fields within there. I can drag images in, so create a static image. Let me just open it up in a new tab. And there were other widgets there as well. So we had tables, we had charts, as we've seen. We have map widgets, and so on. So, refreshing the page, getting back into edit mode. Okay, grand. So, I wanted to see when are my responses coming in. A bit of metadata about my survey. I'm going to drag a chart, blank chart here to the bottom. So I get this grayed out widget. I want to start editing it. All I need to do is click into it. I've dragged my chart where I want. And now we get to the couple of steps I mentioned in the slide. Okay, I've got a few chart types to choose from. Bar chart is fine for me. And I choose my data source. So remember in the slide I said, choose your data source, choose your field, and then customize. My choice is straightforward here because I know it's in my survey. So I choose my Waterpoint survey as the source. Then I'm going to select the horizontal axis for my bar chart. So that's the x-axis. And here I wanted to see when these responses are coming in. So when implies it's a date field, the question when. So I'm going to use the date survey. And I get a few options. So now I've gone through steps 1 and 2, select the data source, select the data field. But okay, that's not the prettiest bar chart. Why? Because the dates are spread over many months. So I'm not really interested in the exact date as much as perhaps months. So I choose from these different options and toggles, I choose to see the year and the month when responses came in. So responses by month. I am typing a title for my chart. And let's see what else I could do. I could say I want to know it by year. Well, that's not very informative for my survey because all of the responses have been done this year. Maybe I want it by week. That's okay, but it's a bit spread out. I'm not so sure that's useful, but for an ongoing data collection, that could well be useful. But for aesthetic reasons, I'll choose year by month. So what does that mean? Year and month, even though the data has an individual date, mWater summarizes it for you by year and month. Now what happened here? Why is it giving me 4 for July, 1 for June? The system automatically picked the number of mWater point survey responses as the vertical axis. That's exactly what I want, so that's great. But I could choose to do something different with it. I could choose to say people using this water point. It's another numerical field. And so on. So it doesn't have to be that, but it automatically chooses this. Cumulative means that it just keeps adding on top of each other, not what I'm after. But you could see, if I'm looking at the total survey responses, it stands at 13. Cumulative means it adds them up. Split axis, now we're getting into the more complicated fun stuff. It means if you wanted to add another dimension of analysis to your data, you could do that by any feasible field of data. I'll demonstrate quickly. So if I wanted to know by location type, I can see that, okay, July had 4 responses, but if I split it by location type, I can see that there were 3 for rural and 1 for urban. And this kind of applies to any data you collect. Maybe if I scroll back up, I can choose this as stacked. Okay. So we get a visually perhaps neater way of doing it. There's a few other options. I can choose to have this horizontal instead of vertical, and I can choose to show values on top of the bar charts by just toggling these options at the top. Okay. Let's say I'm pretty happy with this except the colors I don't like. I can click this individual color box and change it for all of the series, or I can even change a whole color scheme. That's fine, pretty nice and neutral. I can apply filters. By default, it only shows me finalized responses and a few other things. I'm not going to cover this now, but I could add other series here. I could even add a threshold that starts highlighting these bars differently if they cross some numerical threshold. So if I were to put 2 as the threshold and say good effort, and then highlight any bar in a nice yellow, it would mean that because it's past 2 responses, it gets highlighted here. So this can be very good for quick management of what you're doing. Quite a few options of customization. So hopefully I can impart to you that getting data to show was quite quick. Data source, data field. There you go. Getting it to show in a way that you really like it takes a bit more thinking, takes a bit more effort, but we still provide you with these options. Okay. So that's just creating one. We have 20 minutes left. What I would like to focus on next is deep dive into dashboards on the basis of this. Keep rehearsing this basic pattern on a few different topics, few different widgets, because this is where the real magic, in my view, happens. So, what does that mean? Well, I'm happy with my survey report. It's good for me because I'm the manager of this survey, and it's good for my colleague who's also involved running this survey. But I can't really share this dynamically with others. It's linked to this survey only. I can print it, great, I can bring it to a weekly meeting or something, but I can't use all the power of mWater, and I can't bring it into a console or anything. So this is a good starting point. But we have recognized as mWater, in talking to our users, that it's often the case that you start with a survey report and then evolve that into a freestanding dashboard. Dashboard meaning something that sits in our dashboards tab, where there are dozens and dozens of visible dashboards, depending on what permission rights you have. And it will sit there and you can share it with stakeholders who don't really have to have access to that survey. So I have a lot visible for me. I would like to highlight to you the fact that there is a bunch of featured dashboards where you can go right now and look at how they work. And if you go into one, you can also duplicate it. I just want to mention that because for me it's a very good learning method to take a functioning, good, existing dashboard, copy it, duplicate it, it becomes your copy, and then you can do whatever you want with it. And it won't change the original, you're not breaking anything. You can't break anything in the existing ones where you're only a viewer. So take a look at the featured dashboards. In the meantime, I am going to click this button, Make into Dashboard. I'm going to make my survey report into a dashboard. And now it joins that big group of dashboards, that big list that I just showed you. And we get a few nice bonuses from that. I can now duplicate it and I can share it. I can share it with my colleagues, mWater staff. I can even create a shareable link. And I'll put this in the video notes so you can duplicate this for your own experimentation. But what's really powerful about share links is a stakeholder can see this document without needing to log in. Great. Now if I click edit, well, what's great is we still have our familiar customization palette here. So it's the same interface, just a bit more power, a bit more flexibility. So let's create a few more widgets in the time that we have. Let me talk you through that. So what do we want to do? Let's say that we want to map our water points and map their functionality. I'm going to drag a map widget. So I'm dragging it here, putting it at the bottom, and making it a bit smaller. Great. Now what do? I can't just click into it. I can't edit it. What do I need to do? There's a little cogwheel here at the top right. So always, if you want to edit an existing widget, you can click the cogwheel on the top right. So again, it wants us to go through the same process. Now, because to map something in mWater, you need to have a GPS location. If you're mapping a point in the world, you need to have a point. This schema will offer you to select a site type. You can also choose a survey. That's what I'll do because we've been working on this survey that I've demonstrated to you. And as I showed to you, there is a link to a site there. So that water point site question. And that water point site question has a GPS. So it will use that site question to derive the location on the map. So if I didn't have a location in my survey, either a site question or a location question, I couldn't map it, not in the mWater universe. It will also offer to allow to visualize an answer. So it's kind of taking you half the way there. So let's say I want functional status. And then I click create. Excellent. It did something. It's in Malawi. Let me I want to zoom in. I can do that manually here, or I can choose automatic zoom from options. Now I get a nice automatically zoomed view. So pretty great. I get a visualization, but I'm not happy with the coloration. I don't want functional water points to show up as red. That doesn't make sense. So I go back to edit my map and click customize. And I can try and find the right color scheme. Oop. But I'm not sure I'm happy with any of these. I will choose to color them individually. So here we go. No longer exists, I will designate as dark gray. Maybe functional can be a bit lighter of a green. Great, so that's a much more sensible color scheme, okay. And I could change a few things. Let's say a bullseye instead of a dot. Could be it. And I can make them different sizes. I can add some filtering, and I can even customize the pop-up. I won't go into it, but I'll tell you what it means. Customizing a pop-up means you get to choose what shows up when you actually click a point on a map. So that's pretty powerful if you want to show something else than the standard pop-up. So what does that mean? If I click at a point, I get the standard view. I get response, my survey response. But maybe I wanted to show something else entirely. I can do that. So a lot of flexibility here. Now I could add layers to this, but maybe I'll even show you another map. If I wanted to have a separate map side by side, do I need to start from scratch? No, not necessarily. I can copy and paste. There's a trick to how copy pasting works in mWater visualizations, and it is this. I take my existing widget, I drag it to my clipboard, and then I drag my copy out from the clipboard. Voila, and we have two. So drag to the clipboard, and then from the clipboard. Very convenient, in my opinion. Let's put a spacer there. Great. Oh yes, by the way, if you want to adjust your spacings, you can drag a spacer, which is just a blank field, like so, and create a bit of a different layout. Let's see what we can do. I want to have a choropleth map, so a bit more advanced. I'd urge you to spend a bit of time just exploring these visualizations. Choropleth means color layers. Okay, I'm going to choose Malawi. I'm going to choose traditional authority. So now we get all these regions that mWater already has in the system. Very powerful. And perhaps I want to color by data. So I want to color. I select color by data. I get all this filled in. Location I need to pick. Location is the GPS. So I pick it from there. And then I pick, let's say, people using the water point. Equal bins from 0 to 100. Excellent. So with those few steps, I can look at a higher level analysis of what's happening. So you can see that these whole TAs are filled in by these data, pieces of data underneath. We may have another session diving deeper into maps, but you get a sense that what's powerful, what's possible in the system. 10 more minutes. I want to show you one more powerful feature, tables and data grids and pivot tables. So okay, I've got these powerful visuals, but I also have a hunger for data. I just want a simple tabular representation of it. So I'm going to drag a table in and go through the same steps. Step 1, select my data source. Step 2, select my data field. So this time I'm selecting many because one for each column. I want to know which date it was collected. So this is giving me 1 row per response. I want to know which location type I want to know, and again I look at the main section, people using this water point. Great, and I'm building my table as I go along, so pretty simple. The trick is to understand your data structure, right? How is your survey built? As a bonus, I'm going to pick the numerator response code. So this is the unique name that I can say, oh, I'm talking about this response with this code. Great. So I get a table like this. 1 row per response. Now, maybe I'm even more interested in it, the response, and I can click it. So interactivity comes to our rescue and helps our data analysis once more. So here I have built my table by dragging the table, by selecting the data source and selecting the fields. And now, if I narrow anything down, everything updates. These are only monitoring responses. Or, if I just want to look at functional responses, I click the functional slice and I get the filter. So now, in my table, I see it's only the functional data that's showing. Pretty nice. Let's say I want some more summary information. I'll share this in the video notes. I will create a pivot table. So what are pivot tables good for? They are complicated, but they're ways of summarizing data across many responses. So let's say I want to see the average people using a water point by water point type. That's something I can learn from a pivot table. Step 1, data source. Step 2, field. Now we get a bit more complicated, so imagine your pivot table, as many rows and columns as you want. Rows I want is the water point type, I think. So I go to the main section, I link to the water point, and I select type. So the water point site, that point in the world, has a type data field. Now if I create this, I get something. I can tell there were 7 points of data for boreholes. But actually I want the average users. So I can give this a name. Beneficiaries, users of water points. And I want to adjust my calculation. So let me take a step back. What am I doing? Got my pivot table. I've selected the water point type as the row. Now I'm clicking in to the number and I want a different calculation. I want average numbers. How do I get there? I click formulas. There's a whole bunch of formulas available to you, a whole bunch. Experiment with this. They have descriptions and a lot of them are fairly straightforward. But what I'm looking for is average. I can of course just start searching. Average. So now the system knows, okay, Petri wants an average of something. Now I need to tell it what. So average of people using this water point. So again, because I have a numerical field, I know what I want, I can say, show me the average people using this water point, rounded. Don't want all the decimals. So much better. This makes sense. Protected, dug well, okay. Now I can go click my options and say I just don't want to see all these other things. And I can start narrowing this and so on. This is step 3, customization. Heavy borders, different colors, different sorting, whatever. So, just a quick recap. We started with a survey, automatic visualization. We brought that to a survey report, and then we created a dashboard from that. We could create a dashboard from scratch. We added a few widgets. We learned how to select your data source and select your data field, and we took a look at a couple of those options where you can split axes, you can adjust colors, and so on. Quick look at maps. The key thing about maps is you want to have a GPS to map. We built a table by selecting the data source and then the fields as columns, and then this sort of calculation pivot table. You can always duplicate these, going to the clipboard, and then experimenting. What's more fun than experimenting? Now, as we wrap this up, I just want to show a few more powerful things about dashboards. Let's say I want to have one of those quick filters I showed at the start. How do I add them? Here we go. I click Settings at the top, and here Add Quick Filter, and this means giving a drop down for the user by project phase, for example. What happens? I get a drop down, and I can say I'm only interested in monitoring visits, and everything else updates. I don't need to have a widget for it, just have it as a quick filter. Again, settings, add quick filter, let's say date. Now I have a date filter. I can say everything in the last 7 days, last 30 days. Layout options, a few different ones available to make them pop. Printing, export as PDF, share we already covered, printing here as well. And a few other of these widgets we won't get into. So, a few more minutes left. Let me get back to my final slides and see if there's any questions coming in from the audience today. I know we covered a lot of ground. I urge everybody to go out and experiment. If you get stuck, you can always talk to us at mWater at problems@mwater.co or info@mwater.co, or including me, Petri, P-E-T-R-I, at mwater.co. And here are just a few pitfalls you might want to watch out for when you're designing your surveys and your visualizations. Number one, I can't quite visualize my data the way I want. When I hear this, I discover often that there's something wrong in the data type. So you're trying to get a numerical kind of visualization, but your data is a text or a multi-choice, or vice versa. If you want a summary table like the average one we looked at, you'll probably want numerical questions and so on. This always depends on the context, but my advice to you is think about your visualizations already when you're designing your surveys. So we make it easy with mWater to have a test deployment, for example. You can create some dummy data and then try and build a visualization for your survey even before your colleagues are out there in the field collecting the data. So don't just think about visualization after all the data has come through, if you can. Try and think about it earlier and make sure you design your survey so that the visualization is as powerful and as accurate as you want it. Pitfall number 2 to watch out for: I can't map my data. So, as I was trying to point out earlier, you will need some kind of geo-positioning, longitude, latitude information to get your data on the map. Either a site question or a location question in your survey. Then you can map your data. And okay, I've been making a big deal of how useful it is to have your data interacting, but sometimes a user might not get it to work like that. And the key insight is that the data source actually needs to be the same, or they need to be linked. So if you have two surveys and the system doesn't understand they're connected, then you're not going to get them to interact perhaps in the way you want. So think about linking them to the same site. If they're both relating to the same community, have a community site question. If they're linking to the same water point, link them to the same water point with a site question, and then you will have all the interactivity that I've kind of been going on about. Just a few resources to wrap things up and announce the next session. There's a whole bunch of guides on the Portal Resource Center. That's written guides with animations and GIFs, as well as videos. You can find our YouTube channel on YouTube. You can go to mwater.co/YouTube, or you can find us on YouTube itself. As I mentioned, please take a look at existing dashboards, see how they work. duplicate them, take them apart as you like. There's no limit to how many dashboards you can create in the system. Take a look at solstice.world for all your needs beyond wash. And here are just a few picks of interesting books to look at. I think at mWater we're quite big fans of Stephen Few, his information dashboard design work. And I quite like Alberto Cairo and would recommend a book, The Functional Art by him. So a lot of it, I think, to make great visualizations, you also want to have a good kind of thinking and then just a system that supports that. So that brings us, I think, to the final slide and to the full hour mark. Thank you very much for joining me today. And next week, same time, we will have a deep dive into importing and exporting data as well as cleaning it by Brian Jensen of mWater. And that should be a really exciting session, getting good data. There's no point in having great visualizations if you don't have excellent data to back it up as well. So that's part of our continuing series of webinars. Great. Thank you very much, everybody, and hope to see you again.